Hi, Democrats. Today is Thursday, August 3rd, and it's time for the Chair's Daily Live. Happy Thursday. Happy Indictment Day. I don't know. It's Thursday. So, got a lot of stuff to talk about. I'm going to start locally, though. I'm going to start because this all started so that I could keep Oklahoma Democrats up to date with what is going on in our state. And there's so much stuff happening on a national level that sometimes what happens in the state gets lost. So, I'm going to start with Representative Sherry Conley. You've heard me talk about her before because she is the representative who heard what was going to happen with the turnpike that was going through Norman. She lives in Newcastle, so she's on the edge of that turnpike. She heard about that turnpike. She sold her property. She was the first one who sold her property way over market, like $100,000 over market. She was allowed to stay in her property for over a year. And she didn't tell anybody what was going on. So she actually profited from her position. So that has nothing to do with what I'm going to tell you today, but I just wanted to refresh your memory with who we're talking about. I don't want you to think what I'm about to tell you is a one-off. Oh, no, she's a decent person. She's just a little misguided. No, she profited off of what was happening and didn't tell her neighbors. So don't start with me with she's a decent person. But if that's not enough, she released a statement that it is okay to teach about the Tulsa race massacre. But if you say that it has to do with racism, that you're just speculating, and we need to not do that. The Tulsa race massacre, this is more of we want to talk about it, but we don't want to mention that it had anything to do with race. People like her need to be stopped. People like her need to be called out, embarrassed, and challenged. She needs to not walk into that office. We need to run someone against her. And every ad, every door that's knocked, someone needs to remind that she is trying to rewrite history for no other reason than it makes her fit in with the rest of her crowd. Because what is a good reason to rewrite history? No one is blaming her for what happened. It happened in 1921. She wasn't around. No one is blaming the folks who weren't around. What people are saying is we must learn our history. And we must learn our history for what it is. Then I'm going to go ahead and add one more piece in case you're still thinking, well, okay, but those are just two things. I'm going to remind, I'm not a Star Wars person. I don't care. Except when nut jobs, nutcases try to say that Star Wars is trying to make everybody gay. Stop with the fake culture wars, which are more like war on decency. Stop. But she gets to be there because nobody will run against her. So this is me on August 3rd, 2023, asking anybody who lives in Newcastle, anybody who knows someone who's a decent human being that lives in Newcastle, run. Encourage somebody to run. We can't let her keep walking into that office. We can't let her keep serving. It's unconscionable. Speaking of someone else who should not be serving on a local level is Representative Ryan Martinez of House District 39, Edmond. We talked about this in November or December. He was he wasn't pulled over. He was found in his running car. It wasn't moving. I want to be very clear. It wasn't moving, but he was found in his running car, and he blew above a legal amount of alcohol. So he pled guilty this week. He pled guilty for felony DUI. I've scoured. I haven't seen where he stepped down. So currently, he is still a representative in the Oklahoma State House. He shouldn't be allowed to serve. He now has a felony. That wasn't his first operating a vehicle after driving incident. And in both, in this incident, he asked the police, should he call the governor? Why should he call the governor? Unless the governor is in the practice of intervening and making sure that people aren't held accountable to the law. Who knows? But what I do know, right? What I do know is that he has now pled guilty, and he is still a current member of the State House. He needs to not serve. People who are guilty of felonies need to not be able to serve, which moves me to national news. Today, less than an hour ago, the former president of the United States, pled not guilty to 4 additional criminal charges. 4. Conspiracy to defraud the U.S., conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, obstruction of an attempt to obstruct an official proceeding, and conspiracy against rights. There are 6 co-conspirators knowingly spreading false claims. So all of this, the election was stolen stuff, they knew it wasn't stolen. They knew they lost, they knew it wasn't stolen, but they spent money, time, energy out there trying to confuse the electorate, and they're being charged for it. Obstruction of certification, they tried not to allow a fair and free election to be certified. They sent in the fake electors. Just, you guys know my motto. I want everybody to have access to the ballot box, be confident that their vote's going to count, and be educated when they get there. These charges speak to that motto. It's literally slashing each line apart. They started trying to confuse people before the election so people wouldn't show up. And then after the election, they spent all of this time, energy, effort, and money trying to convince people that the election was false. And then when that didn't work, they tried to send fake electors, completely disrupting our election process, got people all in a froth, and that's what caused January 6th. This man is the front runner for the Republican side. So even knowing that he lied, even knowing that all of his fundraising pleas are just to pay off attorneys, people are still saying that they will vote for him. We've got to be louder about what the right side is. And I'm going to tell you again, the right side is President Biden, who's bringing down the prices of vehicles, who's fixing roads and bridges, who's capping insulin prices, who's making it so that Medicare can negotiate with prescription drug companies to bring down prescription drug prices for our seniors. Those are things that affect everyday Americans and improve our lives. That's what's going on. We have to be louder, because on the other side, they're willing to vote for someone who deliberately lied to them and is being charged with that. Willing to vote for someone who conspired to confuse them and being charged for that. So I'm begging you, share the information, share facts. Don't try to argue with folks, share facts. And we just have to break through with the facts. We just have to break through with the facts. Donald Trump worked with a whole slew of folks to try to steal the election. And when that didn't work, he got a whole slew of folks frothed up enough that they tried to steal the election. They tried to storm the Capitol. Well, they did storm the Capitol, and they threatened to hurt elected officials. And when they were in there threatening to hurt elected officials, be clear, they were calling out names of both Democrats and Republicans. They were calling out the name of the Republican vice president of the United States, who was still the vice president for those hours. They weren't just there to hurt Democrats, which is horrendous, but they were there to hurt elected officials, do whatever they needed to do in service to the former guy. I'm sick of talking about him, but he keeps getting arrested, so I have to keep talking about him. And be clear, he was arrested, he was arraigned, he was fingerprinted. There was no need for a mugshot because we know what he looks like. He's not going to escape anywhere because we know what he looks like. He had to agree to certain conditions in order to not be taken into custody. That's a real arrest. Now, it's not the kind of arrest that Cousin Bob gets. His cousin Bob gets some handcuffs and some time in a jail cell, but it was an arrest. So now he's been arrested on, well, let's start out. He's been charged and civilly adjudicated to be guilty of sexual abuse. That happened. He's been charged with a hush money case. That's still open, but that's happened. He's been charged on having classified documents that he knew he wasn't supposed to have. That happened. And now we're at obstruction of the election process. Never thought that there's just a lot of things that keep happening that we never thought we'd live to see. What I hope doesn't happen is that Democrats don't fall asleep at the wheel, and that Republicans and independents of good conscience don't fall asleep at the wheel and fail to show up. We've got to all show up. We've got to talk to everybody we know and make sure that they're registered so that they show up. We have to all show up and make sure that this criminal doesn't get elected again. Because if he is allowed to take the reins again, this will not be the country that we've all grown to love. So talk to your friends, family, neighbors. And I know it's tough with some folks. Some folks have family members that are still under the occult, but make sure that they hear the truth. Make sure that they hear exactly what the charges are. And don't be dissuaded by the whatabouts. Let them say whatever their whatabout is. Don't try to dispute it. Let them say their whatabout, and then remind them. Sexual abuser, hush money, classified documents, obstruction of an election. Those are all factual. You can look them up. Forget what your friends say, what your family says. Make sure that they know the facts. Alrighty, thanks for joining me, and I'll be back here tomorrow at 4:15.